break in the rains today, but that has not provided a break for all the families forced out of their homes.
In Ottawa County, Oklahoma continues to grow near Twin Bridges State Park. It's estimated to be the size of 2 football fields.
From high up above to the ground below, the damage from rising waters is clear.
The scale of the flooding is really hard to comprehend.
Continuous flooding in Miami has become the norm, an issue the city blames on the GRDA.
There's really not a whole lot we can do. You know, the accountability falls on GRDA, and GRDA has never been held accountable by our state, by our governor, by our legislators. They've never been held accountable for anything they've ever done, and somebody needs to hold them accountable.
Well, this past summer, residents in the far northeastern part of the state experienced one of the biggest flood disasters seen in decades. Homes were damaged, farm crops destroyed, and public buildings demolished.
Senator Tom Coburn took a tour of the city and held a town hall over the flooding concerns, hoping to resolve the problem then.
Tonight it begins the beginning of solving this problem.
My name is Bless Parker. My role with the City of Miami is I'm the mayor, and I've been the mayor since 2020. The history of Miami for me, of course, I was born in 1970 and grew up here. And my memories from Miami is just that hometown, that perfect little town in the middle of the United States that everybody knows your business. Everybody's your friend. I grew up before cell phones and stuff, and you'd run around town, and if somebody saw you doing something wrong, they became your mom. They would, tell you not to do that, and that before you got home, they'd contacted your parents. It's just that close-knit family.
The city of Miami started back in the 1890s is when the first lots of land were sold and the city started to kind of be settled and established. There were leaders who they consider the forefathers of the city of Miami. Go back to Waylon Likens, Manford Pooler, and Thomas Richardville. Actually, Manford Pooler married Mr. Richardville's daughter. They were both chiefs. Richardville was chief of the Miami tribe, and Pooler was chief of the Ottawa tribe. And then also Mr. Likens was a missionary among the Peoria Indians. And so those are the three that we consider the forefathers of Miami, and that goes back into the 1890s. They traveled to Washington, D.C. to get legislation lobbied and passed that we establish a city and actually sell lots of land. So that's why the Ottawas donated some of their land and the reservation with them where the Miamis were to start a city. So Miami was one of the first places you could buy deeded property.
I remember at the courthouse, we had this big cement block there where in the evenings, farmers would come and sometimes they'd sell vegetables, sometimes they would play music. And across the street was a big dirt, muddy yard or lot that the horses would park over there in their wagons.
The best I can remember, I've been told the information, my grandmother, my dad's mother, folks, the Faulkners, started the store back in the early 1900s. Grandfather John, that'd be my dad's dad, and Lily Mae, that was my grandmother.
Oh, I loved them. Lily and John Knotts. We ran a bill with them every week, and we paid it off every week. They had this house that they had their grocery store in, just close to where that store is now. They had this curtain back by the meat counter, that they went into their house and they could come out to the store. But every week she would, when we paid our grocery bill, she would give us a sack about that tall full of penny candy. And we always thought they were the greatest people on earth.
30, 40 years ago, we had a sign out front, and I established the date 1919, not knowing whether that's accurate or not. But anyway, no one else can contradict me and say, hey, Jim, that's not when the store started, because I remember I was a little kid in 1914 whenever it started. So anyway, 1919 is the date I have out on the sign, and as far as I'm concerned, that's when Knott's Grocery started, and that's that.
In the early days, and we've got some pictures throughout the museum that kind of shows it, you kind of see like that Western scene like you would see in an old Western movie. It was dirt streets, and you maybe had some wooden boardwalk, sidewalks, and some buildings that were put up. Farming was the main industry that was here when a lot of the early settlers came to Miami. And of course, long before that, one thing that we're known for is out of any other county in the United States, we have the most Native American tribes that have reservation lands here. A lot of the tribes were farming too, living off the land that was here. And some of them came to this area as early as the 1830s. And then many of them were removed through treaties and brought here around the 1860s, right after the Civil War.
We got a historic downtown with the Coleman Theater. It's got that Hallmark card.
I can remember Main Street was just barely getting paved, I think, when I got big enough to understand. On the west side of the street was, a little ways down, was the Ottawa Theater. We used to go in there, and there was this old man. He was our neighbor. His name was Sam. I forgot his last name right now. I can see him, but he would cuss them out. He'd cuss out the outlaws.
Downtown Miami, I think those early leaders, when they were scouting out land, they saw good opportunity of where they built. And these first lots of land or downtown Miami, where we are right now, they built on some high ground. They weren't looking, to build in a valley. They were building near water, but they weren't building what they built in a floodplain.
When the Pensacola Dam was created, when it was built as a hydroelectric dam. Every hydroelectric dam is given a license, and there is a designated entity who operates that dam, who takes the license. GRDA took the license to operate the Pensacola Dam.
The Pensacola Dam, or the dam, was going to be built north of Miami, north of Miami, Oklahoma. From what I understand is at some point a president was running for election, came through Veneta, and they changed whatever happened. The dam was built down in Disney. I don't know at the time how much engineering went really into that, but I do know that the dam was supposed to make sure that any properties north of it would not be flooded.
So I've read the history, certainly, as part of my responsibility as a council member and the mayor, when it was built, why it was built. Original reason for it was flood control and providing electricity. At that time, boating, recreation was not part of the license mandate. It's a significant part now, or at least for the people around the lake it is, but it was not initially part of the mandate of the license.
In 1941, GRDA was mandated. I say mandated, but they didn't do it. They were to buy 12,000 acres. This very section of Northeast Oklahoma is the only section in which they didn't buy these 12,000 acres. On some levels, it's an extremely simple thing, and then on other levels, it's very complex.
When the dam was built, even back in the late 30s and early 40s, there was an awareness by the Corps that there were not enough acres being purchased as easements. For whatever reason, those decisions were made at the time not to purchase additional easements, and that has, certainly become a problem for us here in Miami.
The lake was designed to run at 732, and GRDA runs it at 744 frequently.
It's popular for GRDA or even some of our federal elected representatives to say, well, then why did you build in the floodplain in Miami? Well, it was not the floodplain in the 50s and 60s and 70s when we were building, when our neighborhoods were growing.
Early 40s, 41, the dam was completed. Miami started feeling the flood effects almost immediately. Of course, that was a different time than it is now. You don't have the weather forecasting then that you do now. We didn't have the flood gauges then that we do now. You didn't have social media then like we do now. So we know a lot more information now. The issue for me is GRDA and the Corps of Engineers knew when it was designed and when it was engineered that it was going to have a backwater effect on Miami, Oklahoma, and it was going to flood us. And there were certain flood easements that were supposed to be purchased when it was built. Those flood easements were never purchased. We didn't know then what it was going to do to our town. Now, GRDA and the Corps of Engineers knew what it was going to do to our town. There's documentation and memos to show they knew that there was going to be a flooding effect on Miami.
1939 is when the dam came in. 1943, we've got a lot of photograph collections, a lot of photographers that have gifted collections, and we've got a lot of photographs of 1943 is one of the big significant flooding events that we have. And we've even got images from back then that people were trying to get what little bit of goods and personal belongings they had, even their chickens and their hogs and everything, into boats, and they were putting them up in the top of the grandstands at the fairgrounds to try to get them out of high water.
When I was 9 years old, it was 1951, I was almost 10. I don't remember the month. I hadn't had my birthday yet, but that water was in our house. It went clear up to I remember it was almost up covering the ceilings, but I thought it was just fun. Water in the yard, we swam on boards, played in that water, and it's a wonder we're still here.
My name is Rod Huff. I'm a veterinarian at Miami Animal Hospital in Miami, Oklahoma. Our original clinic was built in 1950, so pre any flooding. And in 51, the flood got up high enough that in the old pictures you can see the top of the tar flat top roof, but you can't see virtually more than an inch of the sidewall. So it's right to the top of that flat roof, one-story building.
We had bought that old house when I was 7, I think. It was a 2-room house with a dirt floor. And Daddy went in there and he rebuilt that house into a 3-bedroom and put the bathroom, did it all by himself. He had a 3rd grade education, but he knew how to do things, and he did them. So they did that, built that house up, and they were pretty upset when they lost their only home.
I've heard stories from school teachers and stuff growing up about having boats come in to pick them up from their houses and boating them out because nobody expected it to be that deep. '80s is when we started having some real issues.
I was born in Miami, Oklahoma in 1947. We moved away for a short time, and then we came back in 1979. We moved into this house, and 5 years later, we flooded.
See, we left the farm in '80, and And so we had a flood in 81.
I have never lived in Ottawa County. I have spent over 40 years crossing that Neosho River Bridge to spend most of my waking hours here.
I was amazed at the dynamics of the flood and the way it flooded my property, which was so unusual because I knew nothing about a dam. When I bought the farm, I didn't know there was a Pensacola Dam.
For 25 years, I was an Indian counselor for the Miami Public Schools. And through those years, I experienced several floods here, mostly by not being able to be here. When all the roads were closed, I could not come.
The water is supposed to run from a high spot to a low spot. That's the way water naturally runs. And when my farm floods, the first time I saw it flooding, the river started moving backwards.
At the time we bought the house, we went for closing in the First National Bank up on the second floor. There was a map as big as the wall. I was so concerned about flooding, and they assured me that we would never flood. They said we didn't flood in 51. All the maps were wrong. GRDA maps were wrong. I have flooded 5 times now. 1985, 1993, 1994, 2007, 2019 was the last flood.
It's been a problem and a source of frustration for years. The recurring issue of flooding was the topic of a town hall meeting in Miami tonight. This is KOAM News at 10. I'm Dow Quick. Tonight's meeting comes amid ongoing litigation between the City of Miami and the Grand River Dam Authority.
My name is Brent Brassfield. My role in Miami was I served as its mayor from 2004 to 2011. I remember a lot of the floods in the 80s. I think Miami, if I'm not mistaken, had something like 21 floods in 20 years. Mid-80s was bad. There was a bad flood, I think, in 86. I'll be 67 years old in July, and I really don't remember a time in which Miami didn't flood. The first thing that comes to my mind is it can just simply rain hard. Riverview Park and parts of town are flooded.
In 1984, I believe I was 14 years old, and my parents built a house out in a housing addition called Eastgate. And Eastgate was a new upcoming development, and my parents built out there. It was about, our house was about a mile from the river as the crow flies. So my parents asked if it flooded there. They were told no, and others that built in that addition were also told no, it doesn't flood. And they built the house, get the house completed. And in February of 1985, I was still 14, and my birthday's in March, so it was a month short of my 15th birthday. Here come the water.
Creeks outside of town, crossing the highway and disrupting traffic and trying to get to school around the flooding. But it wasn't until 1985 that I remember it ever affecting anything in town itself. And then it blocked the main road, Steve Owens Boulevard, as you come into Miami.
We got 3 foot 4 inches in our home. It was devastating because everything is ripped right off underneath you. There wasn't much time to move, so we lost a lot of stuff. I remember seeing my parents just gut punched because they'd invested everything they had into this new home.
Well, I realized that there was some obstruction, and I started asking questions about what the obstruction might be. No one in this community knew that there was an obstruction or that the river running backwards was a strange thing. And I knew that was not a natural way for a river to flow. My neighbor across the street, George Trollinger, says, no, it's the way it always floods around here. That's what happens. It floods like that always. You can expect it to be like that every time. And I said, well, there's something wrong because that's a backwater flow and it shouldn't be flooding like that unless there's something downstream stopping it. And he said, well, there's nothing downstream. He said, the nearest thing downstream is Pensacola Dam. And it's way downstream, Jack. It can't be causing the flooding.
To watch their pain and anguish because we didn't have flood insurance because we were told it wouldn't flood there. I remember us living in a camper in our driveway for months while my dad would go work his day job and then come home at night and cut out sheetrock, tear out carpet, remove insulation. And I believe we had to cut out 6 feet up, I think is what they did. Cut out 6 feet of the sheetrock, and everything from that point down had to be redone, and it had to be done on our dime.
If you had water in a bathtub and you pushed it all back, it's all going one way. When it hits a wall, like the dam, and the water is held too high, the water rushes back, and that's called the backwater effect. My flood comes from the south, not from the north.
The first flood that comes to my mind was when I was employed at Inyo A&M College. About 1984, 86, somewhere along in there, we had a flood. I happened to be over in the cafeteria, the student union, and the floodwaters were up to the dock. That was very scary because we did not want our food to get spoiled by floodwaters. And the floodwaters at that time got into the basement of some of the buildings there at the college. And that was back in the early 80s.
80% probably of the businesses in Miami are shut down completely during the flooding because they're either in their buildings or they're diverting traffic to where they can't get to their buildings. I mean, there's been years that they completely closed the turnpike off where people couldn't get off the turnpike to come to Miami.
Now, there's various times across the river, the water goes across Highway 125 on the west side of the bridge, and it may be across there for a day or two or up to a week, like I said. Of course, that hinders traffic, reroutes traffic, and subsequently impacts the business. Not to the point where it's, where we need to close by any means, but it does have an impact, like you say, and not a positive thing, but it's something we obviously deal with, and probably over my 50 years, it's probably happened 20, 25 times.
My parents, forever, from that point on, forever, the floods were something that was common around not only my home, but our community. People were always afraid that the floods were going to get them. And it didn't seem like you were safe anywhere you lived because the floods kept getting greater and greater and greater.
And I asked George Trollinger where that Pensacola Dam was, and I said, well, they're flooding us. And I said, their backwater is flooding us, and I want to go down there and talk to him about it. So he told me where to go. And I remember the attorney I talked to, her name was Miss May. She happened to actually be a resident of Miami, Oklahoma. And it wasn't a good conversation. I went down there in my farmer's overalls because I was trying to be a farmer at the time. I bought the farm, and that's what I wanted to do. I left New Mexico. I was an engineer at White Sands Missile Range. I was a facilities engineer for 3 million acres of exclusive use ground. And I wanted to raise my family here because this is the kind of environment I wanted. So I went down there in my farmer overalls, and I met Miss May. She let me in the headquarters. And I said, hey, I don't know if you know it, but I said, the backwater from your dam is flooding my farm in Miami, Oklahoma. She was very upset with me. She says, I'm really getting tired of these dumb farmers coming in here and telling me that this dam is flooding their property. She says, I bet you, if I show you this map, I bet you can't even find your farm on this map. And I said, Miss May, You're right. I am a dumb farmer because I don't know anything about farming. I said, I'm trying to learn. But I said, as far as finding my farm on this map, I'll show you exactly where it is.
My mother got sick, and we moved her into our house to take care of her until she passed. And she passed July of 24, just a few days before she passed. She called me to her bedside, and she said, I need to tell you something. I said, okay, Mom, what do you need? And she said, I'm not going to be here to see the end of this, but you will be. And I'm quoting her here. She said, make them son of a bitches pay for what they did to all of us. That was still engraved in her from 1984. She still had those scars and that pain from what they did to our family. And families here carry that. And they carry it every day. And when it rains, that fear just bubbles back up again because they're afraid their home's going to be flooded.
Started gathering documents through the Freedom of Information Act. And believe it or not, that Freedom of Information Act doesn't work. When you write a letter through Freedom of Information, you're supposed to get an answer. But all they do is say, no records have been found. It went on for a long time like that, and I tried to convince people in this community, tried to teach them and explain to them what was going on. And quite frankly, they didn't believe me either. Bob G. was a very important attorney in this community, well liked. Everybody liked him. He was well known and he was well appreciated, and he was a smart attorney. He was also on the board of GRDA. GRDA, the Corps, and every official lied to us and lied to us and lied to us and told us there was no such thing as backwater. I was making spurious allegations. Oh, this also increased my vocabulary. I had to get in the dictionary and find out what spurious meant. It's a good way of calling you a son of a bitch without actually calling you a son of a bitch, okay? That's what they were calling me. All the way up till 1993, about the time we sued them, they were still saying that there was no such thing as backwater.
Somebody may get mad at me for saying this, and I really don't care. Legislators get to the Capitol, whether it be state or the U.S. Capitol, and they forget who they were working for. They get up there, and lobbyists come and see them, and money starts flying around, and promises start getting made, and they forget they're working for the people.
Still met with a lot of frustration. Our elected representatives, especially our federal representatives, just turned a deaf ear for the most part to us. I'm not going to say they never came and met with us, because they did a couple of times, but they just turned a deaf ear to us, and they listened to GRDA, and they looked at GRDA's studies that's done by a graduate student rather than these top-notch, world-class engineers that we had providing our studies. And that's what they believe.
There's an old long-standing argument proposed by the Grand River Dam Authority that, well, Miami shouldn't have built in a floodplain. Well, the reality of the situation is Miami never built in a floodplain. This wasn't a floodplain until the operation of the Pensacola Dam by the Grand River Dam Authority. Once the dam went in, suddenly flooding became a normal trend. And in their own documentation over the years, they even made reference to the fact that, well, we flooded them, no one said anything, so unless anybody's going to complain, we're just going to keep flooding them. It's cheaper to flood them and settle a few lawsuits here and there than it is to do what we should have done from day one, and that's to go back and buy all the necessary flowage easements to correctly operate the Pensacola Dam. That's why Miami floods. It's very profitable for Grand River Dam Authority to pool the water, allow it to back up, and then generate the water out to generate electricity rather than simply letting the water flow.
I've got an article here written by Bob G. to the Miami News Record, and it says, the whole idea of backwater defies the laws of physics. Can you imagine that? The laws of physics describe the backwater effect. That's how much they were lying to us. They lied. They brought the Corps of Engineers and GRDA had meeting after meeting after meeting with city officials and the mayors at the time. And they would say, oh no, there's no backwater. No such thing as backwater. And there's never been a backwater effect. So we tried to get state officials help us. And there was not a single state official in the state of Oklahoma that would help us because of the political and financial background that GRDA has. We did get a very important state official to help us out of Kansas. His name was Bob Dole. Bob Dole organized what he called the GNRC committee, which was a committee of all stakeholders that got together once a month for about 3 years and went over all of the issues over and over and over. And at the end of that period of time, they published a book that stated their findings. And what their findings were exactly what the court findings have been, is that, yeah, the dam is causing some problems to the city of Miami. But still didn't have any documents, okay? So Senator Dole asked me if I would ever be able to find any backwater analysis done by the Corps of Engineers. And I said, they're probably in archives somewhere. And I said, I'm not allowed to see any archives. He said, you are now. I went down with a man who is dead now. His name was Woody Woolrich. We went through the archives. And we looked and looked and looked. And we did it 2 weeks. And it's a huge building. You can't, if you stand at one end, you can't see the other end of it. That's how far it goes. They would bring in carts and carts of documents that we asked to look at. And one morning, we opened up one of those boxes, huge big cardboard boxes. This is the first backwater analysis that the Corps of Engineers did that they said does not exist. 1941. And the subject is results of backwater computations in the Pensacola Reservoir of the Grand Neosho Spring River and Elk River, determining maximum backwater effect. 1941, they knew they were flooding us by 12,000 acres according to this. This is when they didn't do it with computers, man. If you look at it, it's all handwritten and it's all calculated by hand. 12,000 acres. They said they should have bought and didn't. And they were flooding us by 12,000 acres. We looked a little further, and in 1942, they wanted to make sure they didn't make a mistake. Here's another backwater analysis they said didn't exist. The subject is results of backwater computations on the Grand Neosho River from the mouth of the Spring River to the head of the Pensacola Reservoir for determining the revised envelope curve of maximum backwater effects. Came up with about the same number. And guess what? The computations that they're doing today come out with about the same number. Way back in 1941, they knew that they were going to be flooding us, and they knew how much they were going to be flooding us, and they flooded us because they did not give a damn. And the reason why they didn't is because every time they flood us, they make money. They make lots of money.
And that's the problem with Miami and its flooding. That's why the floods last as long as they do, is because they're intentionally holding the water. They're intentionally pooling the water so that they can generate electricity. And the real irony of that is they're generating electricity with water that they're flooding you with. They're damaging your community with flood water, generating electricity off of that flood water, and then turning around and selling that very electricity to you at a peak rate to sell electricity back to them at the higher than normal rate because you can.
And so what if they have to pay us $10 or $12 million every 20 years? Because that's how long it takes us to settle a lawsuit. The first lawsuit, 1992 or something like that, it took 20 years. It's a drop in the bucket compared to what they make every time they flood us.
The rain fell as if it would never stop. Ponds and rivers filled to the brim, then overflowed with the tainted waters. As the water crept through city streets and climbed its way up into houses, their owners watched in grief, not knowing how to stop it. Some filled trailers with their most priceless belongings, hoping to escape the rising waters with something to start over with. Others waited while their houses were enveloped in the unforgiving water. They stood watching, hoping the rain would slow to a drizzle and let the waters return to its home. It came and then it went, letting most everyone return to their normal routine, at least the ones who still had a house. While the lives were turned upside down, went in search of a new beginning, looking for a better life than they had had before the waters consumed them.
This very section of northeast Oklahoma has had so much flooding over the years. One of the kind of sad things is during the flood of 2007, the Weather Channel was here. And Stephanie Abrams asked me a question, and it was, I go around town and people that are not in the flood water just simply act like nothing's happened. And it hit me that really Miami's experienced so much flooding, people have almost come to accept that that's the natural way of order.
As the emergency manager, I'm thinking, what are we going to do if it does flood? Who is going to be involved? How are we going to assess this? And I start calling my contacts.
We met July 1st, about 9 o'clock. City Manager Michael Spurgeon called me and said, it's coming, meet me in emergency management. And there's a picture in the flood book of us being briefed by the former emergency management director. And he knew at that time it was going to be bad. We didn't know really how bad. We knew it was going to be worse than the flood of 86, and 86 was bad.
I joined the council in 2007. I took office in May. In July, the 4th of July weekend was the second worst flood in the history of Miami.
I was born here in Miami, in the Miami Hospital, and have lived here all my life, grade school, junior high, graduated high school here. Chris and I got married and we bought a house out in Eastgate. They came to me one day at work on July 2nd, I think, and said, the water's coming, you guys need to get out of your house.
The flood at that time, the water at that time was raising an inch an hour. You know, it was a monsoon in southeast Kansas that always compounds the flooding here when that occurs. All of our tributaries were full. That always compounds the flood. We had a council meeting on Monday night after we had met Sunday evening. The firefighters were sent out Monday morning, door to door in the areas of town that we knew was going to get it. We went in to council, probably about a 2.5-hour council meeting. And we walked out, they were waiting for us in the hall, and they told Michael and I, the city manager, that while we were in the city council meeting, the water had raised 1.5 feet.
For several nights there, I was here at City Hall taking calls from residents wanting to know how high is the water going to get, what's going to happen.
So we started having 3 press conferences a day to try to keep the people abreast of what was going on. You know, I've always said that these kind of events show the best in people and they show the worst in people. We had people in one residential area, mainly 2-story homes, to where people were pulling up in a boat to the second floor of this house that was not flooded, break the windows in, go in and steal.
Chris stayed there because there were so many looters that would come in and take your stuff that he stayed there just to kind of protect. No electricity, no nothing. So we would stock him up with an ice chest and he'd go upstairs and just stay. And we went in by boat about 3 days later, and it was time for him to get out of the house. We were just gonna have to count our losses if anybody stole anything.
I think the thing most immediately from that 2007 flood, I live on the south side of the river, and just getting to work became a challenge. So at that time, I was in the newspaper business. I was the publisher of the Miami News Record at that time. And what was normally a 5-minute drive, if that much, to get to work every morning, suddenly turned into a 45-minute drive.
2007 was 500-year flood. Today it's raining as we shoot this, and to this day I still get PTSD. The great thing about the flood of 2007, if you can say there was a good thing that came from it, we lost no lives. 14 feet of flood water doesn't come with an instruction book. I had driven out to look at the college that was basically underwater again, and I looked out on the football field and there was a guy on the 50-yard line in a canoe fishing. There was a picture taken of people out there on the football field fishing, and it just really struck me as ironic. A lot of people don't realize that really a major part of the struggle was post-flood. I think at that time there was about 6,300 homes in Miami, and 10% were flooded.
3 different houses, and they're all wiped out.
Like so many here in Miami, the family had no flood insurance. The restaurant is now all they have. It's where they've been sleeping at night.
The water in the flood of 2007, as it is in a lot of floods, but particularly in 2007, was what they call Class 1 contaminant, I believe is the correct term. Essentially, the water was so polluted and so toxic, it really almost went beyond what sewer water would be. They would clean these houses and get the black mold off the walls and whatnot, and then within a matter of a few days, the black mold would come back. You really couldn't penetrate it. It was so bad. We had to go red tag businesses and homes, which was a very, very difficult thing to do, because if the flooding damaged more than 50% of your business or your house, 50% of the value of the house, we had to red tag it, which means you're not going back in it.
The devastation, the cleanup is horrendous. It's so smelly. And
had we not done that, had we not abided by their mandates, essentially, Miami people would not have access to flood insurance. It's very difficult to tell somebody you can't go back into your business.
I worked my very hardest so Jeff could come home. He would come out and sit in the driveway in his truck with his portable oxygen, and the kids strung a tarp over the top of his truck to keep the sun off of him. And he would sit there all day long while I worked inside, because he hated to see me doing the work. But we had used all the money, the insurance money that we had went on materials. So I did everything from hanging insulation. I scrubbed and disinfected the house. And
we had been told that we were going to get these trailers. They were new trailers, and they were in a yard in Arkansas. So they bring these trailers down, they're enclosed in a chain link fence, and they hadn't started dispersing these trailers to people that were flood victims. I get a call, I think it was maybe public radio, something like this. And this guy said, Mayor, he said, are you gonna allow these trailers to be given to your people? I'm like, what? He goes, well, he said, well, these people are getting sick that have been given these trailers.
Keep in mind, this happens just a couple of years after 2005, right? But what happened in 2005? We had Hurricane Katrina down in Louisiana. So most of the trailers that were being sent here were FEMA trailers that were part of that fiasco down there. There were issues with those trailers.
It was quite an event and quite an introduction to
how bad it can be.
No one should die in a FEMA trailer. I wanted to bring him home so bad, and I just worked as hard as I could, but I just couldn't get him home in time. He never got to come home again.